had a chance to catch all the great panels during the summit. We are very excited about the future of Cardano and IOHK and look forward to giving the world access to the capabilities that Cardano offers us as a next-generation blockchain platform. We will now be talking to you about the great state of Wyoming, a pioneer in our industry, driving regulatory innovation that is enabling unique business opportunities. Today, you will hear from Tyler Lindholm, representative of the state of Wyoming, Caitlin Long, founder and CEO at Aventi Financial Group, Chris Land, general counsel at Wyoming Division of Banking, and Stephen Lupien, CEO of Beefchain and professor at the University of Wyoming. I hope you enjoy the presentation, and without further delay, I will pass things over to Tyler. Over to you, Tyler.
Thanks, Jerry. Really appreciate the opportunity. Kind of a bummer we can't all be together right now, but as things are, it is that way. Last year we were in Miami together and it was awesome. If you missed out on Miami last year, you missed out on a fantastic event. This event's going to be pretty great too. And hopefully we can plan on next year in some kind of wild, exotic location like Laramie or Cheyenne. Right. Or IOHK and Cardano can hold their summit. I think that'd be fantastic. So the state of Wyoming. Who would have thought that a bunch of cowboys would lead the charge in revolutionizing blockchain and legal precedents? I mean, arguably, really nobody could have predicted that, but it's also important to note that Wall Street did not win the West. It was cowboys that won the West, and this is kind of a Western frontier. So that's what we're really looking at here, folks, and we've done everything. We really have. We've looked at it all. We've delved deep. We've looked at qualified custodianship, availment, money transmitters licenses, up and down the list, even to protect our great developers and provide First Amendment rights for our developers in writing code. Code is speech, after all. And so that's a really important aspect. Now, I know a lot of you are looking at me a little weird talking about these things because I'm a giant cowboy, but I'm a geeky cowboy, so hold on. So over this last year, I think, and Caitlin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're over 20 pieces of legislation passing the law now. Is that about right?
Yeah, we're up to 20. Yeah, it depends on how you count them, but yeah, we're in the double. We've got a two-handle for sure.
Right. So our first big stick, and this is something that I think is important, worth mentioning, is how did this all happen, right? Because we do have that question quite a bit. How did this Wyoming turn into kind of a technological hub when it comes to digital assets and blockchain technology, and how and why you should move your company to the state of Wyoming? So first and foremost, it's important to note that Wyoming's been working on this issue. This didn't happen overnight. All of a sudden, we didn't just become cool. We've been working on this for a number of years. I ran my first Bitcoin law in 2016 and arguably got my ass whipped. In fact, I think the Division of Banking is sitting in this call who said ass whipping. And that was specifically in regards to the money transmitter licenses. You see, Wyoming used to be one of three that was garbage in the United States as far as digital assets are concerned. And we set out to change that. In 2016, I ran my first law, met some hard resistance. And then in 2017, I think it was, is when Caitlin and I were introduced. Caitlin had been hard at work in Delaware and setting that state up. And they took some of her suggestions, but in large part kind of didn't take it as seriously as they should have. And here in Wyoming, we did take it very seriously. So we started out with cleaning up the transmitter law, but we also looked at, sorry guys, the problems of working from home, right? One of the issues that we looked at was electronic records. So what we're talking about there has to do with corporate law, and what we're diving down into is how are we supposed to maintain a business in 2020 with laws that were written in 1930. And so we updated those to allow for blockchain technology to be used and electronic formats to be used throughout our business laws. And that was a good piece of legislation. But then, and Caitlin blames me for this, and I blame Caitlin for this, and I don't know whose fault it really is. But we had time on our hands before legislative session started, and one of us mentioned, well, what can we do that would really shock and awe the industry and attract them here? And that's when the idea came up and I think this was Caitlin's baby. She mentioned, well, why don't we handle the ICO situation? And we had some attorneys from New York on the call that said, that's crazy, you'll never get it done. And here we are. We got it done. And that was the first utility token law in the United States, well, in the world. And Wyoming set precedents, and it's something we're super proud of. And since that time, we've passed numerous other pieces of legislation setting legal precedents in the state of Wyoming. So when you hear your colleagues, especially even the folks at IOHK, which, by the way, is a domiciled company in the state of Wyoming, when they start talking about Wyoming, don't brush it aside, because only that level of legal precedents that can actually protect your business and protect your assets exists in the state of Wyoming. That's it, bar none, hands down. Other states have tried. Other states have poked their nose under the tent, but nobody's really gone the distance like we have. So with that, Caitlin or Steve or Jerry or anybody or Chris would like to jump in. I think it'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, Tyler, you have done, or I should say Representative Lindholm. We never call each other by our formal names, but we've been in the trenches on a couple of late night, bill redraftings in the process, along with Chris Land when he was at the Legislative Service Office, helping to do all the research behind this. So, we've been in the trenches together for sure over this long period. And I think it's worth adding, Tyler, that there's a really interesting confluence of events in Wyoming. We have no income taxes. We have a really strong commitment to privacy here. And maybe you can give a little bit of the story about Wyoming LLCs. And a few years ago, some of them ended up in the Pentagon Papers. And there were some folks in Wyoming who were a little not happy about that and thought maybe we should make everybody unmask their identities behind their LLCs. And that came through the legislature. Why don't you pick that up, and then I'll come back and finish on some of the other attributes that made it unique to Wyoming and why we were able to pull this off.
Sure. So as like a quick little background, the Panama Papers were all about shell companies that were holding multi-millions of dollars worth of assets. And most of them were not held in Wyoming, but some of them were held in Wyoming. And that was reported on, and it was like this big shame thing, right? Where everybody was talking about Wyoming and, oh, shame on Wyoming for having these privacy laws where you can actually hold a company without disclosing who all your shareholders are. And they came to our legislative committee and sat down and really gave us the hard sell. And the question was asked, well, what Wyoming laws did they break? Well, none. We're done here. We're done here. And that's what Wyoming's really about, is we're not harboring criminals or anything like that, but we are harboring privacy. And we're holding on to it as tightly as possible. And that's right there next to Bitcoin in and of itself. I mean, this ideology of being able to be private in your doings and without Big Brother looking over your shoulder and, just essentially infringing upon your rights. That's what Wyoming's all about. And so that's kind of a fun aside. But that was like 2016, 2017.
Yeah, but it wasn't that much further ahead of all the blockchain bills. And I think it's important to underscore that, because it is actually a big part of why Wyoming is so special. And so you got folks like Tyler who are in legislative leadership who believe in these principles that are consistent with the principles in the digital asset industry. And then the no state tax situation. Wyoming has dynasty trust laws, so a lot of wealth is coming into Wyoming because wealth goes to where it's treated best, and it's treated best in the state of Wyoming right now. And so you add all those things to this digital asset opportunity, and the state looked at it and said, all right, what's the upside, what's the downside? And that calculation was extremely tilted towards the upside. And I'm grateful to IOHK for being one of the first of the big crypto companies to re-domicile here. There are many others coming, and I know Charles himself has a connection, actually deep family connections to Wyoming. So to him, it didn't seem like a foreign land, like it probably seems to some of the New Yorkers in the world, for example, or San Franciscans in the world. But there are very important macro reasons why Wyoming is the right place for the home of this industry.
Right. Well, and, compounding on everything. From our LLC laws to, just black corporate laws, down to our laws concerning your actual digital privacy. Before the blockchain laws ever came around, we had the Digital Privacy Task Force that went about and passed numerous pieces of legislation protecting your rights online. Everybody talks about California and the law they recently passed. Wyoming was way ahead of the pack. You're not going to pull that crap in the state of Wyoming.
Yeah.
So kind of exciting, kind of an exciting time to be in the state of Wyoming. And honestly, and I'll be very upfront about this. Granted, I hold digital assets myself, probably not as much as some on this call. However, I will state unequivocally that this is all about economic development. This is about getting your business into the state of Wyoming. I want you to move here. I want you to move here and prosper and raise a family and put your kids through the best education out of 50 states. And I want your business here. And it's not because we've got a corporate income tax or we've got a personal income tax and I plan on raking it in. I want my kids to have the opportunity to be able to work for an organization such as writing code or something like that. The reality is not every one of my kids is going to want to grow up to be a cowboy and work cows. Neither will they want to be a coal miner or something like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Hell, I've done both, and I still work in both fields. But that opportunity is really why the Wyoming legislature has driven the bus in this regard.
Yeah, and it's probably worth handing off to Chris, who did a lot of the research on the laws. You probably thought we were crazy when we started working on this.
I actually got to say something about Chris real quick. So, Chris had no idea what kind of a horse wreck he was getting himself into. I called the legislature one day, the Legislative Service Office, where our staff attorneys work, and I said, I need a staff attorney that knows something about blockchain technology or digital assets. And they said, I don't know what that is. I was talking to the secretary. She said, I don't know what that is. We got this new guy working for us, though. So he's fairly young. You might have an idea. And I remember Chris picking up the line, and he said, hey, this is Chris Land. I said, Chris, I don't know you. You don't know me. You must have just started. He goes, yeah, that's right, Representative Lindholm. I did. I said, perfect. Well, I've got a hell of a deal for you, and I need you to get real sharp about blockchain technology and digital assets within the next month, and then write this law. And not only did he do that, he walked down that bunny trail with us every step of the way and became, now he's general counsel for the Division of Damn Banking. The sons of bitches stole him from me.
Well, Tyler, it turns out I knew too much. It turns out I knew too much. But yeah, thanks for your comments. Now I have it on video, so you can't ever take it. I still remember that day, bits and pieces of it. And no, it was a fascinating piece of the law that, so much of what Wyoming and other states do at the legislative level is just copying other states, right? And, that particular piece of legislation, the utility token bill, was one of the most original, out of the box concepts that I've ever kind of interacted with. It kind of on a legal level, it was truly new and, truly groundbreaking. And that's the reason it was so much fun working on it. I got up to speed quickly, or at least I figured out how many questions I didn't know the answer to, and decided to go find out what the answers were. But it's been a pleasure working with you, and continuing to work with you. And it was just the start of things. The utility token law, as you guys all know, was kind of the thing that really got the world's attention on Wyoming. We had kind of staked our position on utility tokens and ICOs, and it really got us a lot of attention, and it kind of set the stage for the other stuff, the other building blocks that we put on top of that, like the special purpose depository institution, like our digital asset legal framework, and protecting code of speech and all the other great laws the legislature's passed over the last couple of years.
Yeah, why don't you tell us about the special purpose depository institutions? Full disclosure, my company Avanti is applying for a charter. I didn't initially plan to do that, but I looked at the lineup of folks that wanted to create something, and it's hard to start a bank in the US. Chris can talk a little bit about the process and what Wyoming has done to try to simplify that. But it's a federal process that's tied into the Federal Reserve. And so it's not easy to start a bank. And a lot of people started, and a handful of us made it to the starting block. And that's where we are. So.
Yeah. Caitlin, as you mentioned, a bank is probably one of the most heavily regulated entities in the U.S. Mainly because the main reason is because it's kind of the core intermediary of the U.S. financial system. It can do a lot of really cool stuff, but at the same time, it takes on a lot of risk, and a lot of the people place a lot of trust in banks, rightly or wrongly, depending on your policy view. But at the federal level and even at the state level, it's a very highly regulated entity. Financial services, that the industry as a whole is undergoing a really, really interesting phase of innovation at the moment. Kind of Bank 2.0 is really what a lot of high-level thinkers, academics, and policymakers are looking at right now. What does a bank look like in 10 years? What does it look like in 50 years? Does a bank still exist? Do we unbundle banking into different sectors, or do we need to add things into what we call the business of banking?
Or do we need to end the Fed?
No, we do not need to end the Fed. You're wrong about that. Tyler, that does not represent the view of the Wyoming Division of Banking or anyone. Policymakers are looking at things like central bank digital currencies, faster payments, and increased access for consumers, and increased opportunity for offering different financial products to consumers, and kind of allowing them to be more flexible in how they bank. The Wyoming legislature passed a law in 2019 that kind of sought to merge banking and innovation for the first time in the U.S. in a really meaningful way. The OCC had tried something a few years before called the OCC Fintech Charter that sought to really merge fintech companies and banking and allow them to do innovative stuff across state lines, but it's been subject to legal challenge. And we like to say in Wyoming that the SPDI is kind of the OCC Fintech Charter, but it's actually illegal. No dig at the OCC there. They're just starting to kind of get up to speed with what we've been doing the last couple of years. You may have heard that Acting Comptroller Brooks a couple of weeks ago announced his plans to start looking at national banks doing digital asset custody activities. Wyoming's been looking at that for 2 years. Quite sure that they're going to be kind of following in our split steps over the process that we take over the next year or so. So kind of getting into the details of the SPDI, it's a bank under federal and state law. It's a bank in other international jurisdictions as well. It's required to maintain 100% of its fiat deposits as liquid assets, so it cannot lend its fiat currency. That makes the bank provably solvent, and it also kind of underpins the SPDI's business model, because its primary use, or at least we believe so, and based on what applicant business models we've seen, its primary business model is going to be digital asset custody. And when you're involved in the digital asset space, you want to be provably solvent, because that's the whole mantra behind the digital asset community. So it has the full range of banking powers, fiat on and off ramp, custody powers, commodities transactions, securities transactions, payments, and digital asset lending, all the other fun stuff that banks can do. And the reason that's cool is because banks can do all that without having to get 10 separate licenses, and they can do it across state lines. It's just the way the banking system in the U.S. works. So they can do all those stuff except lend fiat. Why is the SPDI important? Well, everyone knows that there are a number of trust companies that are involved in this space nationally, and they're acting as digital asset custodians. And lots of people have asked why we have plenty of digital asset custodians in the market right now. Why is there a need for other custodians? The main reason is most traditional asset custodians in the U.S. today aren't actually trust companies. They're banks that receive deposits under federal law. So the fact that there isn't a regulated bank in the digital asset space that's available to provide custody services limits the ability of digital assets to actually participate in the marketplace. There's certain things that you can only do under federal and state law if you have a regulated custodian that meets the highest level of institutional standards. And again, in order to be a bank, you have to receive deposits, and trust companies can't do that. So that kind of excludes them from a certain class of activities.
So Chris,
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, can I interrupt and ask, what's the benefit of all this to the digital asset industry? If you're an individual owner of digital assets, Pomp likes to say, short the bankers, right? Why is this a good thing for the digital asset industry?
Yeah, sure. It's a great thing, or it could potentially be a positive development for the digital asset community, because as I mentioned earlier, banks are very highly regulated entities. They're required to have a certain level of minimum capital. We think in the kind of the $15 to $25 million range, and yearly exams. And essentially, the main point I'm trying to make is that if you put your digital asset in a Wyoming SPDI, it's going to be you can have confidence that it's going to be regulated with the highest level of regulation, and it'll be provably solvent, and you should be able to have a great deal of trust in how that entity operates.
Presumably, that would bring interest from institutions.
Yeah, it has.
That's the plan.
Yeah. It's definitely tailored to institutional money. They, for better or worse, they want high capital requirements. They want heavy regulation. They want predictability and certainty in how they're dealing with their money, because they're not going to give you $1 billion to hold on to unless they know they're going to get it back. So, we've tried to tailor our regulations to make sure they're innovative and they understand the technology, but at the same time, we're not relaxing standards. We're not committing regulatory arbitrage. We're not providing a haven for fraud and misconduct. We're trying to find that balance between innovation and consumer protection. And I think we've done that.
Good answer. Don't be an asshole and come to Wyoming. We only want the good ones.
I definitely only want the good ones.
I will mention too that we've talked to about 150 to 200 people over the last year and a half about the Wyoming bank charter, and we're down to a very strong select group of applicants. Because most people didn't understand that it's a bank, so you have to have capital, and there are certain requirements. BSA AML applies, and all that fun stuff. So it's a hard charter to get, but the applicant pool we have thinks that it's important because you can do a lot of cool stuff in the banking industry that you can't do outside the banking industry.
Chris gets pretty antsy in the pantsies whenever I bring up certain terms, and there's been several phone calls over time saying, Tyler, you can't say certain things because it makes certain federal regulators nervous. What are some of those terms, Chris? Could you remind me?
He wants to get them on video.
I don't actually know. Yeah.
I have no knowledge.
Now, the reality is, on the special purpose depository, what we were able to do there is really a lot of dreams come true. It really is. Not just because the space needed a qualified custodian for digital assets, and we've industrialized digital assets. I mean, that's cool. But what's really, really damn cool, and I remember that when this happened, I was actually at work, and Chris had just bugged me on the phone. He's like, man, I need to these amendments for this bill. You've got to decide on this charter on how it's going to be. And at the time, I was the chairman of the blockchain task force. And one of those amendments was deciding the fractional reserve percentage that this entity had to hold. And I mean, everybody can probably see the signs behind me.
I thought it was going to be like 90% or 95%. I didn't think 100 was, realistic.
Right. I mean, most of your banks are 1.5%. I mean, and there's some great community banks out there that do a lot.
It's a little higher than that, but it's it's a little higher than that, but it's less than 10%.
The traditional banks are pretty leveraged. Yeah.
It's stupid. It's theft is what it is. They're using your money against you. Just saying. But the reality is there's a lot of good community banks out there that do a lot of good work. Chris regulates those organizations. But at the time, so I called up Caitlin. I was like, dude, I don't know that we can put down on paper anything but 100%. And she was like, hell yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Ask Caitlin again in 2 years when she's running the bank and see it's more difficult. Yeah.
Right.
Well, what it forces you to do is be a fee-based service provider, right? Which is what, instead of a counterparty, right? Because banks today are counterparties. When you put money in a bank, it's an IOU. If you put your ADA on deposit at Kraken, it's also an IOU legally. Mm-hmm. You don't own your keys. You don't own your coins. What you own is a substitute. It's a close substitute, but it's not the same thing. And so, this whole idea of, all right, if we're going to force companies, that's the wrong way to phrase it. If institutions are forced by laws like the Investment Company Act or the Investment Advisors Act that require them to use a third-party custodian, which we know a blockchain could be a third-party custodian, but the laws haven't caught up to the technology yet. So, all right, that's a given that there are just a certain, portion of a large swath of the institutional investor market has to use a third-party custodian. So what's the right way to do it? Let's create a financial institution that is a bank so it can pipe in directly to the Fed itself, but it is also not a lending bank. And so even though you're technically a counterparty for your dollar deposits, you're not actually at risk of leverage, of credit and interest rate risk that traditional banks force you to take.
That's a really geeky way to say it's a good deal. I think we're about ready to move on to the University of Wyoming, which, by the way, I gotta mention something. Like, when we first started down this road, it was just it was just an idea and a couple of us. And then we started the blockchain task force because we were starting to see companies starting to show up before the bills were even passed. It was nuts. And I think they're still out there. Block Crusher Labs, I think they're still out there. They started in Nova Scotia, Canada. And because the bills were even being introduced, they moved to Cheyenne. Boom. And I think those cats are still out there. They're still out there riding the range, kicking ass. But then we had the University of Wyoming kind of show up and like, this is kind of cool. We've got some knowledge here. We want to play. And all of a sudden now we've got a whole blockchain center at the University of Wyoming. So Steve, can you talk about that?
Yeah, love to. Before I do that, one thing I want to bring up is everyone else on this call are just blockchain brilliant celebrity type people. My story is a little bit different. Before I got involved with Caitlin and Tyler in the legislature, I was running a construction chemical company in New York City. Ironically, I've never lived west of New York City, and but I had blockchain experience. I deployed a number of blockchains in my business, and I had some political experience. So got involved in working with the blockchain coalition. And ironically, my very first time stepping foot in Wyoming was with everything that we are doing with blockchain. I had visited in my running Fortune 500 companies in my 35-year career. I had visited every state except one, and ironically, that was Wyoming. So I know you're sitting there saying, "Hey, this all sounds great, but move to Wyoming." Well, I got to tell you something. I did it. I've now been a absolutely happy resident of Wyoming for a little bit over a year now, and could not be happier. Wyoming is its people, and as you see from Chris Land and Caitlin Long and Tyler Lindholm, these are the people of Wyoming. So if you're concerned about, are you going to fit in, is it too cold out here? The answer is yes, but you'll be fine. And, I got to tell you, Wyoming is unbelievably livable. And I could not be happier that I made the move to Wyoming, which brings me up to what Tyler asked me to talk a little bit about. I've done two things since I moved to Wyoming. One is, got mixed up with a couple of cats like Tyler Lindholm and Senator Ogden Driscoll and some others. And we started a blockchain-based company called Beefchain. We are the first USDA certified blockchain-based supply chain tracking company. We track Wyoming
company,
beef.
Period. I think that's important. Period.
There you go.
First blockchain company, period, to be certified by the U.S. government.
There you go.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I'm also very proud that I've been asked to get involved with the University of Wyoming. One, to teach some blockchain courses, but more importantly, the University of Wyoming, like the state of Wyoming, recognizes that there's something special going on here, and we need to grab this cat by the tail. And the University of Wyoming is all in. And University of Wyoming is soon going to announce that it's standing up a blockchain center of excellence, which will involve all of the colleges of the university: law, ag, computer science, engineering, business, health sciences, you name it. And all these colleges at the university are going to coordinate together. They're going to offer minor programs. They're going to offer certificate programs. And they're going to work with businesses like yours to help provide research. There's consulting opportunities, there's networking opportunities, there's any number of things the state university, the only state university in Wyoming, can uniquely do to help you as you either start or relocate your business to Wyoming. So, you've got in Wyoming, you've got a governor that's completely on board. You've got a willing legislature. You've got a university behind you that will help you navigate through all of this in whatever way that you need help. You've got regulators that get it. How many states do people actually believe that their regulators get it? And in fact, the regulators are actually an asset to you being able to start up your business. From the Division of Banking to the Secretary of State's office, who oversees a fintech sandbox that Representative Lindholm set up, where you can essentially have a little bit of regulatory leeway to experiment with your businesses a little bit. As long as you keep the state of Wyoming informed of what you're doing and you're not ripping anybody off, they're going to let you have a little bit of leeway to try your business out. So there is nowhere, I think, in the world that has the perfect storm of opportunities that Wyoming has. As someone who never thought I would find myself living out west, let alone in Wyoming, let me tell you something. You can't make a better choice than to mix up with these cats. So with that, I hope you're truly enjoying this conference, and I want to hand it back to Jerry.
Wow, thank you so much for your time. I want to thank our distinguished panel. I think if there was a secret before as to why IOHK has chosen to domicile in Wyoming, to partner with companies like Beefchain and the University of Wyoming, it's just a knockout package of ease of doing business, not only regulatory clarity, but regulatory innovation. That's something you don't hear every day. And also, I think it's just some real bedrock industries that you have in your state: agriculture, energy, and now banking and financial services, coupled with a world-class university. And plus, it's been a real pleasure just working with the people of Wyoming. It's true what they say, just, transparency, honesty, friendliness. It's just been a real pleasure. And I think a year from now, when we have our conference in Wyoming, we'll have a lot of great news, I think, within the next 12 months. So, I just want to reiterate all the great things that have been said on this panel, and really, really appreciate your time, and thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have fun, everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining the talk. This was a pre-recorded talk. This was a pre-recorded talk because a lot of the participants were unavailable for the day. I have captured the questions, and I will go through them. The ones I can answer, I will. For joining the... Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the panel. Unfortunately, this was a